Calgary Storm and the Calgary Mustangs? I always have to ask this question in my Remember the Calgary series. As a Calgary sports fan that I mostly do on my YouTube channel, I had a few inspirations to do this Remember the Calgary series, where I'll talk about Calgary sports teams from the past that are no longer around, but based on doing some research, I'm able to find some information on all these teams. And I would say the inspirations that I got to want to do this series was the Calgary Hitman Corral series, where I took in those 3 games at the old Stampede Corral, as well as See a Dead Clothing. That's the clothing line locally here in Calgary, where they have put on Calgary landmarks and Calgary sports teams from the past that I've already talked about in the series, and we'll talk about later on in the series if you see the introduction video, as well as that CBC story about Chris Wilson and his hockey jersey collection. So you can see those links in the description below. But this is episode number 12 in my Remember the Calgary series. Well, we'll talk about the Calgary Storm and the Calgary Mustangs. Primarily the focus of this episode is the team that was around in 2001 to 2004 that had that name. However, when I was mapping out all my episodes, and this will be the last of 3 episodes where I talked about soccer teams in the past. If you see this episode here, the last episode, I talked about the Calgary Strikers and Kickers that were around. So you could see that episode. But I had 3 episodes in a row here where I talked about Calgary soccer teams. However, when I was researching all the teams in the past, I had to widen the net a little, as there's a few other soccer teams that I will talk about in this episode, but I figured there wasn't enough information or even relics, and I barely was able to find any relics for these teams to talk about to make a whole episode on. So if you watch towards the end, I do have some bonus teams that I'll talk about in this episode. So let's get going on my notes for episode number 12 in my Remember the Calgary series, where we'll talk about the Calgary Storm and the Calgary Mustangs. And I say we're about halfway through this series right now. So when it comes to the Calgary Storm and Mustangs, well, one team that you might think there was a couple versions of, there was actually another Calgary Mustangs team that I actually will touch upon as well. I think it's a different identity because there was a Calgary Mustangs team that existed in 1983, which is kind of in between the period where we had the Calgary Boomers in the North American Soccer League, which I talked about that team in episode 10, and then we had the Strikers and Kickers after this Mustangs. But in 1983, as we'll talk about first, there was actually a team called the Calgary Mustangs in the Canadian National Soccer League. And I only found this website, where I'll put all the links in the description below, on all the teams that I'll talk about and cover, where I also share some relics. In this particular episode, I only was able to find logos, so that's what I could find online, and not going high and wide to the library and that. But there was a 1983 Canadian Professional Soccer League, where this Calgary Mustangs were a part of, and founded in 1982, December 7th, 1982, by John Bailey, and there were some star players that I couldn't find any that actually played for the Calgary Mustangs in 1983, but here's that logo. So the owner of this Calgary Mustangs team was Edgar Egarina, at a budget of $650,000 at the time, and they did play at Malata Stadium, where the Calgary Stampeders used to play, as well as the Strikers and Kickers. If you see that episode where the capacity was 5,600 seats there, where the old Malata Armory is right now on the west end of downtown. The general manager was Dave Davies, and there was Gunther Knowles, head coach, and the key players on the Calgary Mustangs team from 1983 was goalkeeper Manfred Mueller, I'm assuming that from Bayern Munich in Germany, München it's called. Defender Holger Bruck, formerly of the Calgary Boomers, one team that I talked about in episode 10. And then midfielder Franz Hiller, striker Howard Sawyer. So other teams that actually the Calgary Mustangs played in this Canadian Professional League. There was the Edmonton Eagles. There was the Hamilton Steelers. Then there was the FC Inter Montreal, and then there was the Mississauga Croatia. And then there was the Toronto Nationals, and then that was all the teams in this league. The Calgary Mustangs, if I scroll down to the standings here, I don't think they had as good of a team. They didn't make the playoffs that year. They actually were 5th out of 6. And then it shows the standings as of late June that the Calgary Mustangs, they had 2 wins, 1 tie, and 5 losses. And then there were players that or teams that actually folded mid-season, and ultimately on July 12th, 1980, the league decided to end regular season play, and Montreal Toronto failed to go on due to financial back. And so the final standings that I see on this clipping, that the Calgary Mustangs in 1983, they did play 10 games. They won 6, lost 6, won 2, lost 6, and tied twice. They had 12 goals for and 20 goals against. And then the playoffs, how it played out was, they were also mentioned that Gunther Noel quit as coach of the team because he did not get paid. So this league definitely did not last long. It only lasted 1 season. How the playoffs went was in the semifinals. Hamilton beat Mississauga 3-2. Or it's Hamilton Steelers 2, Mississauga 3, so it was actually Mississauga that won. And then actually Hamilton did play at the Everwin Stadium. And then they played another game because there was Hamilton beat Mississauga Croatia 4-1. And then, so Hamilton won the series 2-1. And then the Western semifinals, the Edmonton Eagles actually did beat the Calgary Mustangs, so we did actually make the playoffs, I guess by default. But we lost to Edmonton in the Western semifinal, 2-0. So ultimately Edmonton and Hamilton played for the championship, and Edmonton won 2-0. It's not really the best of website. You can definitely see it was a dated website for this Mustangs team. So I've got to acknowledge that Mustangs team before going into the main part of the episode. So that was the Calgary Mustangs in 1983. But in this team that we'll talk about, that there was the Calgary Storm, that they were a professional base team that came in 2001. They were rebranded as the Calgary Mustangs in 2004, and they also played, this team that I'll talk about, actually played at the Foothills Athletic Park, which is right between where McMahon Stadium and Foothills Stadium, where the baseball diamond is. And yes, we'll talk about a few more baseball teams later in the series, including the Calgary Cannons, which that'll be towards the end of the series. And I said the team was the original Mustangs. I think it was a different identity, was in the Canadian Professional Soccer League that only lasted 1 season. But this team was started off as the Calgary Storm in 2001. It was called the USL Premier Development League, USL PDL, finishing as playoff champions. So the Calgary Storm, when they first came into existence in 2001, they played in the USL Premier Development League, which is a level low before we talk about where the Calgary Storm and the Mustangs went in. So they won the playoff championships. So in 2002, the Calgary Storm moved to the USL A-League, which is a step up. And I would say the team definitely struggled to maintain their success from the Development League into the A-League, as the team continued in the USL A-League, changed its name to the Calgary Mustangs in 2004, which is why I call it the Storm Mustangs. So that franchise is all together. And following the end of the 2004 season, the owners elected to not play in 2005, so the team folded. So this team only lasted 4 seasons. The team never acquired a significant profile in the Calgary sports marketplace. I mean, you gotta keep in mind that the Calgary Boomers, if you go back to that episode, there was an indoor and an outdoor team. The indoor team actually played at the Stampede Corral in the wintertime. Then the outdoor team played at the McMahon Stadium, where the Stampeders primary play, as well occasionally the University Calgary Dynamos for the university ball. But the North American Soccer League at that time was also on shaky ground towards the end. But I don't think Calgary really has a huge soccer that if we would ever want to be in the MLS. I mean, I'll talk about a couple teams that are existent right now that are still part of Calgary sports in the soccer scene. But I said that this team never acquired a significant profile. The USL PDL Calgary Storm averaged only 2,000 fans at Foothill Stadium in a city of 900,000 at the time. We're over 1.2 million people as of 2020. In their final season, the team's attendance, because I think actually what we're getting to is that the Storm, they played at the Foothills Athletic Park, I remember. And I actually did remember at a local bookstore in Calgary, when the Storm first came to the scene, these team, I remember they were on a cover of a local soccer magazine. So I do remember them existing and seeing clips of it on Global. But I think when they were the Mustangs in 2004, they actually played at McMahon Stadium. And in their final season, the team's average attendance was just 1,258 in McMahon Stadium. That holds 35,650, which was roughly equal to a team playing a 6th-tier English professional soccer. So it's kind of a ouch right there. But that's the kind of the gist of the Calgary Storm and the Calgary Mustangs. I mean, the Calgary Storm kind of had, the typical Calgary colors that you associate with, the red and black. But the Calgary Mustangs kind of had that blue and gold color that you kind of associate more with the Alberta colors. So that's what was the case with the Calgary Storm and Mustangs. Year by year, well, in 2001 when they were in the Development League, they were the season champions. But then in the 2002 and 2002, they were 5th in the then Pacific Division, but they got out in the first round. And then in 2003, they were 4th in Pacific and did not qualify for the playoffs. And then in 2004, they did not qualify for the playoffs as they were 7th in the Western Division at the time. I do have some websites that I also put in where we show the records, but I think if we look at the records on StatsScrew, in 2002, the Calgary Storm had 4 wins. They lost 21 games and had 3 draws. And then they had that similar record of 4 wins, 21 losses, and 3 draws in 2003. And looking at the stats, I mean, I think if I could find the top scorer that was on the Storm at that time, well, there was Chris Lemaire for 2002. He had 4 goals and assists and 9 points in 19 games. So you can look at the StatsScrew. This is all I could find on these teams. And then in 2003, there was a Nick Zunga, who was the leading scorer in 2003. In 25 games, he had 6 goals and assists for 13 points. That's all I could find on this StatsScrew website. And then when it comes to the Mustangs, who had a marginally better record, and I'm not too sure if they had an alternate logo as well that I'll share in this video. But in 2004, the Mustangs, which was the last year of this team, they had 4 wins, 18 losses, and 6 draws. And then the leading scorer for the Mustangs, according to the StatsScrew, that I have all in the description, is that there was a Conrad Smith. He played 22 games, he had 2 goals, or 6 goals, 2 assists. So, I mean, this team definitely struggled once they got into the Premier Development League. And then there also was another team called the Calgary Storm Prospects that were around in 2002. I think it was kind of the farm team for the Calgary Storm main team, that they were a Canadian soccer team founded in 2002 as the Storm Select. They were members of the United Soccer League's Premier Development League. You had the PDL, the 4th tier of the American Soccer Pyramid. I know there's like several leagues that's around, and it said until 2003, after which the team left the league and the franchise was terminated. The team's last 3 games of the 2003 season were forfeit. So I don't quite remember this Storm team. I mean, I guess it gives you an idea how much soccer was big in the Calgary market. According to Wikipedia, it did say it played at Glenmore Park Stadium. I'm not quite sure exactly what that is, unless that's the same stadium I'm thinking of. I mean, it's generally at Foothills Athletic Park, right between McMahon Stadium and Foothills Stadium right now, if you're familiar with Calgary, which is near the University of Calgary grounds, and where the father David Bauer Arena. So that's all I have for the Calgary Storm and Mustangs. That was another one of soccer teams in history, but they keep the soccer analogy going. Now let's go into injury time. Let's talk about some bonus content as well, as I got a couple more Calgary soccer teams that I'll talk about that I figured there wasn't enough material for me to make a separate episode. But after the Storm and Mustangs, actually there was another team that Calgary had that was called the Calgary United FC. What makes this team very unique is that they played their games indoors, and believe it or not, their first season that the Calgary United FC existed, they actually played at the Stampede Corral. So the Calgary Stampede Corral, which is in process of being torn down right now to make room for the BMO expansion, the Calgary Stampede Corral hosted some soccer with the Calgary Boomers and the Calgary United FC as they were participating in the Canadian Major Indoor Soccer League. And then after the 2007 season, they moved to the Subway Soccer Center. That's in the Foothills Industrial Area in Calgary. That's kind of south of 52nd, down along 52nd Street, around south of 50th Avenue in the Foothills Industrial Area. But this was a unique soccer league that only comprised of a couple teams in Western Canada, as that there was a team in Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, and Winnipeg. I believe there was also a team in Prince George. And all I could find on the Wikipedia is that there's not too much to find on this team. As I said, they were founded in 2007. Chairman was Chris Baker. Manager was Tony Flannery, and they were in the Canadian Major Indoor Soccer League. I mean, the only coaches that they mentioned was Dave Randall from 2009 and Jeremy Lesnowicz from 2008. And it has a schedule, and then year by year, how it worked out was in 2007 was actually only exhibition games where they played at the Stampede Corral. And then in 2008, they finished second in the regular season, but they lost the final in Edmonton. They said the league attendance actually for the exhibition games was 1,850. And then they had 300 in 2008 season. And then in 2009, they finished second again, but lost to Edmonton in the final. And they finished second in the league and had 92 average attendance. And then in 2010, it says that they finished first in the division, but they lost to California in the quarterfinals, which I can't quite find how they were able to eventually play teams outside of this league. And then it says the average attendance was 209. And then 2011, the FC United finished first. It says it lost to the quarterfinals to PPM Cybex del Estadio de Mexico. So I think this team must have played out of their league, or maybe they won their league and then played for another championship. And then in 2012, they finished second in the league and lost the finals in Edmonton. And then it's a year-by-year stats. Well, 2007, they were 2-2 in the exhibition. And then 2008, they played 10 games. They were actually 8-2. And then 2009, they were 8-8 with 16 games played. And then in 2010, they were 8-2. And in 2011, they were 8-4. That's all I could find on this FC team. I mean, I'm just throwing it in there just to knowledge about this team in this series. And then I said the home arena, as it does say that the Calgary United's first home game was at the 6,475 seat Stampede Corral and ice hockey and rodeo arena. That was also used in the annual Calgary Stampede. And then beginning in 2008, the Calgary United moved to the Subway Soccer Center in Calgary, as I mentioned. And then there was only honors that they won the Cardinal Cup champions in 2008. So I think they must have won something, and then there was a league championship, but that's not much I could find on the Canadian Major Indoor Soccer League. So those are all the teams that we'll talk about in the past. That there was a Mustangs team separate, and then there was the Storm Mustangs, which is mostly what I talked about in this episode, and then the Calgary United FC. So that's all the defunct Calgary soccer teams that I have in this series. But then a couple more teams that we still have right now is we have the Calgary FC, which right now is still active. They finished their second season, and this team is in the Calgary, or the Canadian Premier League, as I meant to say. the Calgary FC. Right now they're still alive and well as they played 2 seasons. They played the Echo Field, which is where Spruce Meadows is, and I know there's a devoted fan base, and I do see some Calgary merchandise, but right now, I mean, obviously the global pandemic made it tougher to go to games this year, but it's just that it's way, way down south at Spruce Meadows where I am to catch a Calgary FC team, but hopefully maybe I might be able to catch a game one of these times, assuming this pandemic ever ends and we are allowed to go out and have fun and mingle again, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. But the owner of the Calgary FC is the Spruce Meadows Sports and Entertainment, and I would say there's more footing for this team to maybe succeed. I mean, you can find videos on here about the Calgary FC, and I think the only way I'd be able to maybe go to a game is maybe go to a bar and take a bus to the game and then come back that way. I know that I saw one video where actually they showed some Calgary FC fans that they talked about the teams that I talked about in the series about in the past, but they played two seasons in the Canadian Premier League, and they were managed by Tommy Weldon Jr. and they're owned by the Spruce Meadows Sports and Entertainment. And then the record that the Calgary FC had, well, in the first season in 2019, as they played 20 games, they had 92 wins, 5 draws, and 4 losses, and they finished first in the league, and they were runner-ups in the playoffs. I was like, I'm not sure who they lost to. And then this past season, well, it was shortened due to the pandemic. In 10 games, they won 5, draw 1, and lost 4, and they finished third in the league, but they did not make the playoffs. But I would say the Calgary FC had some initial success, and as I know, they're still coming around. And then the other team that still is existent right now in Calgary, there's a team called the Foothills FC, the Calgary Foothills FC, or the CFFC, is a Canadian soccer club based on the Calgary. It competes in the USL Tier League 2. The team was originally founded as a youth club back in 1972 and then joined the USL 2 franchise in 2015. They play their home games at the Foothills Composite High School in Okotoks, and their team colors are actually green and white, so that's definitely different. So this team's been around for a while, but they have been some success as well the last few years. But then we know with everything being canceled in 2020, the 2020 season was not did not happen. But the last few seasons, well, in 2015 they played 12 games. They were 3-2-7, and then finished 4th in the Northwest. Did not make the playoffs. But in 2016 they were 8-3-3, finished 4th in the Northwest, and they won the championship final, or they went to the championship final. Then 2017, in 14 games, they were 8-2-4. I'm assuming that means wins, draws, and losses. They were 2nd in the Northwest, and they got to the Northwest Division final. But in 2018, would say is their final season, as they were 11-1-2. They finished 4th in the Northwest, and they were the champions. So they won the championship in 2018, lost in 2016, and then in 2019, in 14 games, they were 9-3-2, finished 1st in the Northwest, and got to the conference semifinals. And when I looked at this league before I went on camera, that this USL League 2 is a massive, massive league that there was like many divisions all over North America. So that's all I have for Calgary soccer in the Remember the Calgary Series, as we've talked to many soccer teams that we've had in the past, and I'll just kind of touch upon the couple teams that are still around today in the Calgary FC and the Calgary Foothills FC. But I still think we're a tougher market to draw soccer based on what I have shared in the past in the last 3 episodes. So I guess, what memories do you have of the Calgary Storm and Mustangs, or may I dare ask the Calgary United FC, or have you taken in any games with Calgary or the Calgary Foothills FC? So that is episode 12 in my Remember the Calgary series. So after spending some time on the soccer pitch, for the next episode, episode 13, well, I'm going to be leaving the soccer pitch and going back to the rink to talk about another hockey team. And so far up to this point, all the teams I talked about have all been male teams. But in episode 13, I'm actually going to talk about the Calgary Inferno. the women's hockey team that we had in the Canadian Women's Hockey League, if I believe I call that right, who won the Clarkson Cup twice. So they'll be talking about some women's hockey in the next episode that I have planned on my Remember the Calgary Series, and most of the teams eventually will talk about. I still have more hockey teams to talk about. And of course, there'll be a few more baseball teams that I still got to talk about. And I'll throw in some wrestling as well towards the end. And I'll do a final recap. So if you go back to my introduction video in this playlist, that's where I outline all my plans. And in that description, I'll update the links to all the videos that I make. So I have to ask, what do you remember about all the Calgary soccer teams that I talked about, either in this episode or the previous episode where I talked about the strikers and kickers, or if you go back to episode 10 where I talked about the Calgary Boomers. But sometimes it's hit or miss to find any relics for me to share in this video or any videos that I have. I would say in this video all you're going to get is logos for me, and all the links I'll put in the description where I kind of made my notes and to share with you. So as I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home to Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, and don't say formerly home to the Storm and Mustangs, also the FC United, as well currently home to the Calgary FC and the Calgary Foothills FC. I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, and in this series in particular, I've been talking about Calgary sports teams from the past. I also do have personal vlogs, attempt at comedy, and also do share my experience with them on the road or at a sport event. That's what I all have on my channel, so if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, you know what you need to do. Just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below for other ways you can follow me. So as I say, let's go Storm, let's go Mustangs, and I'll see you in the next video, and enjoy a few more logos that I'll share that we've had from the past, that all I could find to talk about the soccer teams. But in terms of the Remember the Calgary series, we're still only about halfway through it, but I'm definitely done talking about soccer teams, as there is no more soccer teams that I found that's worthy to make a video on. So look forward to some more hockey teams from the past and some baseball teams from the past, and I purposely put the Calgary Cannons and Stampede Wrestling towards the end of the series, because I think those are the two episodes that I think most people would be wanting to watch the most, as I would say those are the two Calgary sports identities from the past that we associate and miss the most. So as I say, I'll see you in the next